Hello, everyone. I guess we're starting really sharp on time, which is great. I'm Francesca Bria. I'm the Chief Technology and Digital Innovation Officer of the City of Barcelona. And it is a real pleasure to welcoming you in this session on collaborative platforms for digital social innovation and sustainability. I will just introduce the session. And this is a topic that is very dear to us here in the city of Barcelona. And before coming here to Barcelona to have this role, I've been in the last years very much involved in Europe to work with bottom-up organizations and public institutions such as cities and the European Commission in particular to make sure that the kind of direction in which we are developing technology has a very important social impact. So we started kind of thinking around the concept of digital social innovation, which is basically innovation for social good, which has an impact on the way that we think about public services, technology that can change the way we deliver health, education, transportation, and lots of the kind of important challenges and urban challenges that cities are facing. And we also realized that basically you have a big organizational change that you're facing when you're thinking about really integrating technologies in the way that you deliver public services, but also in the way that you engage all the citizens and cities, stakeholders, thinking about why we develop technology and for what. So it is really exciting that the European Commission 5 years ago has started a program which is called CAPS, Collective Awareness Platform for Social Innovation and Sustainability, that is part of the digital agenda, broadly speaking, the digital policy that the European Commission is fostering. And when they were thinking about the future of the internet, not only they thought about a technology push approach, a very technological trajectory, but also thinking about the sustainability questions, environmental questions, the social issues, and bringing social and economic and policy into the equation. And so they've been investing 60 million euros in these CAP projects throughout the last 5 years. And we have an ecology of projects with pilots, very concrete on the ground throughout Europe, and now also globally, because this is a project that is expanding beyond Europe, that is really showing how you can start very small projects, maybe radical small projects that lead to systemic change if you integrate it with the rest. And I think this session is gonna give us some taste of what has been experimenting across Europe, in the UK with Nesta, and in Barcelona, where we're really betting on this concept of digital social innovation is part of our digital policy for the city. So we are creating a new sector in the City Hall that works on digital social innovation and collaborative platforms and cooperative platforms, and really get the kind of grassroots capacity and innovation to help the cities to deliver these new digital services. And I have to say, this is one of the programs that Europe has started where, I mean, for the last 50 years, maybe we are investing in technology much more for military and commercial innovation. So we have seen, I mean, even the rise of the internet or the commercial internet has brought us a lot of like fantastic technological innovation, but very much focused on commercial or even military. And now there is a huge space where we need to invest public resources and support with policies and really align all the stakeholders to invest in technology and innovation for the social good, for social return, for public return, and look at what's happening in society. And I think that's how we can scale digital social innovation. So now the European project has been replicated in the US, where the National Science Foundation is also launching a program on digital social innovation, and then in Australia, which are doing the same. And I mean, here we have conversation with all the other cities that are asking us how we make sure that digital technologies have a bigger social impact, and we always align technological innovation with the social side of things and the economic needs and the policies. So I hand over to Fabrizio, that is going to moderate the chair from the European Commission, and then to introduce the panelists.
Thank you, Francesca. Good afternoon, everybody. So I think Francesca already said it all. I would just like to add that I'm very, very glad of having had the opportunity of driving this new initiative, which is really a change compared to the normal activities that we launch and fund in the European Commission, not because they are more boring, perhaps in some aspects, but because it's a different perspective. It's not just technological research, it's finding new applications, meaningful applications of technology that we have available or that we are still researching. And the main features and main specific characteristics of this program, CAPS, that Francesca mentioned, is this involvement of communities in the research projects and the multidisciplinary aspect in the sense that we also expect a participation not only from ICT actors in the research project, but as well as from social sciences, economy, arts, and anything else which is relevant for the objectives of these activities. So without indulging any more in these kind of comments, I would like to give the word to the first speaker in line. Before this, just a small reminder that you will be able to ask questions at the end of the session through the app provided by the Smart City Expo. So if you have any of these questions, and then you can vote on the questions that I should pick up then for the speakers. So now the floor to Peter. Peter is a political scientist which is heading the collaborative economy research at NESTA, the National Endowment for Science, Technology and Arts in the UK.
Great, thank you much, Fabrizio. First question, I've got some slides. How do I click through them?
I think you should go there.
I should go there, all right. Oh, just magically wave and see. All right, do it yourself. All right, great.
You should go and click play. Yeah, someone is going to click.
Someone's click. There you go, great. So before I start, I want to be honest with you and say I'm aware that I'm a Dane speaking in English and I speak very fast. So you here in the front row, if it goes too fast, you just raise your hand, let me know, and I'll try and slow down. So once I've said that, on to my presentation. So as Fabrizio mentioned, I work at NESTA. For those who don't know us, we are a foundation based in the UK, aiming to support innovation and creativity within public services and the third sector. And naturally, over the last 5–10 years, as we've seen digital technology take over all parts of our life, we've also been interested in understanding what does it mean for how we do social innovation. And we're really, really grateful for the support from the European Commission. We've had to do this project looking at digital social innovation in Europe, what it means, who the people doing it are, and how we can best support them. So Francesca already kind of introduced this kind of main argument, but the reason why we think this is so important is that over the last 10 years, 20 years, we've seen billions of investment going into digital innovation, but those two areas that have received by far the most focus when it comes to R&D is military and the private sector. And although we know that there's huge opportunity in innovating for public good using technology, open data, open hardware, they don't get nearly the same amount of focus, attention, investment, or research, or the kind of attention of public policy as they could have. So what we, led by Francesca, we did in our first piece of work was to try and understand, well, first of all, how can we really articulate what is digital social innovation? So we had this great job of spending 2 years looking at all the great practice around Europe. And in many ways, it's incredibly encouraging. You come across examples like this, using open data to create transparency around government spending, using open hardware to make DIY radiation sensors, involving people in undertaking crowdsourced cancer research, or providing internet access in rural Spain using open networks. So there's a huge area of fantastic examples where people are really pioneering great practice. We're kind of trying to map all these people, their projects, and what they do. You also find the kind of the sadder side of the story, if you want, which is this is quite a large community, but it's incredibly disconnected. Most things are incredibly small scale, rarely get access to public funding. And I think one of the biggest challenges for DSI when I think about kind of my work over the last 10 years on social innovation is that it's primarily driven by startups, new organizations, people like Thomas, who come at this from a new angle. They aren't your traditional established charity social enterprises. There are newcomers to the field, and I think some of the biggest gains in this space could be had by helping established charities, community groups, social enterprises who might not be that digitally savvy understand how technology can be applied to help them address their work and do their work better. And we published all of that work. It's all free to access, and you can download it via that link. Just say one of the things we then found was that what can we do at Nesta and with support from Fabrizio and his team to support DSI in Europe. So we set up digitalsocial.eu, which essentially is a network for those interested in DSI in Europe. And what we try and do there is four things. One is try and provide info on where's the money and where are the events like this happening, and how can I connect with other people who are working in this space. How can I learn what it is? So what are the stories, case studies, examples of best practice out there, and how can I learn from it? We're quite lucky that the vast majority of good stuff happening in this space is open source, so once you find it, it's quite easy to steal it, replicate it, and build on it. But the other main thing we're doing is trying to take the angle of how can we lobby on behalf of DSI. So just last week we spent a Tuesday afternoon at the European Parliament talking to members of the European Parliament on what is DSI and how can it really help them address some of their big political agendas around refugees, healthcare, social care, education. And we're trying to bring the agenda into the core of kind of political power in Europe, and we'd like to do the same thing in city halls and national governments around the world. Because I think if we don't lobby, if we don't get these things in front of politicians, they're going to remain quite small. And the other thing we do is kind of going to the complete other end of the spectrum and spend quite a lot of time with practitioners. So a month ago, I had a fantastic 3 days at the Maker Fair in Rome. How many here have been at a Maker Fair? Can you raise your hands? None of you. That's a shame. We should have like, all right, 2. Next year, we should have a Maker Fair next to the Smart City Expo. Amazing, because it's a fantastic kind of showcase of all the great stuff happening out there using open hardware. My favorite example was this guy here on the right-hand side, who's developed the open source wheelchair, which is a wheelchair you can build yourself for 150 euros. When you talk to him about his project, so that's me and a friend of mine riding the wheelchair over there on the right. It works, it's a functioning wheelchair, but nobody can buy it because none of the funders, be they hospitals or NGOs, understand how to buy something that's an open source thing. They're used to buying traditional wheelchairs from big companies that are made under patent, under copyright. And I think if we can do something good on this project is to help shift the focus towards how we pay for stuff like this. The final bit, and probably the most important bit of our work, is trying to understand how can we kind of, looking at this type of practice, understand the social impact of DSI and how to scale it. So at Nesta, we developed this kind of general spiral for understanding how to scale social innovation. But if you try and apply DSI to this, I think there are kind of four main features we need to think on. First, on the early stages, spend a lot more focus and attention on experiments. So how can we kind of create new types of practice and innovation in this space? Secondly, how can we get really serious about evidence? And this is as much a challenge for the community of doers as it is for policymakers. A lot of the businesses I talk to don't really want to have a conversation around what is my social impact, what is my business case, but they need to, because that's how we attract public funding. So how can we invest in that and help them do that well? Thirdly, once you do that, how can we then scale this through buying it? How can City Hall, how can national governments buy this stuff? How can it become part of how we think about traffic, mobility, healthcare, and so on? And thirdly, how can we change those systems? So this is about how we vote, how we define money, and so on. So outside our work for the Commission, we're also trying to walk the walk a bit at Nesta in terms of how we do this. So we've done a number of projects, which I'm not going to talk in detail at, but I just want to encourage you to have a look at. So first of all, we did a paper last year, which basically took all of our insights from our work on DSI and said, how can we apply it to the debate all the stalls are having out there, and saying, how can we kind of rethink smart cities from the ground up, looking at how does digital social innovations help you address stuff around mobility, pollution, and so on in cities. And actually, it's quite interesting, when you look out there, there are civic tech solutions that involve people in not just living in cities, but also in doing stuff to their cities for pretty much every single city solutions. So it's how to find those relationships. We also funded something called the Open Data Challenge Series, where we're trying to bring open data practitioners and the open data movement together with people who do work in housing, food, and so on, to try and say what happens when you kind of fuse the open data movement with very traditional providers of social services. Looking at kind of how to scale this, one of my other areas of work in Nesta is focusing on crowdfunding. And of course, crowdfunding has increasingly become an area where public funders are looking to... Does everybody know what crowdfunding is? Show of hands. Good, that warms my heart. It's good. Otherwise, this is going to be another 10 minutes. public funders are increasingly getting interested in crowdfunding. So what does it mean for how we spend public money? So how can you work with the crowd on identifying good projects instead of just having them write grant applications, paper-based work? How can you work with platforms on finding good projects and match money coming in from the crowd? The problem is a lot of funders want to get involved in this space, but they don't know what the real evidence, what works, is it better than traditional funding, and none of the platforms have really done any work on this. They're just basically getting money out the door. So what we've done in the UK is work with the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, which is the funder of huge amounts of heritage and sports activities and charity activities in the UK, on designing an experiment where we'll actually test how does match crowdfunding work, which matches work, which don't, who are the people who get involved, how much money do they leverage, does it get you a better projects off the ground than traditional funding, to try and demonstrate and create the evidence that would then help more funders get involved and fund other interesting projects. Another interesting stuff we do at Nesta is fund actual businesses and projects, often trying to take them from that early stage of idea concept to kind of scale. And I think Good Sam app, so that's my strapline, the Uber of emergency responses, is probably the best example of doing that to date. So Good Sam app is essentially, has an Uber function where, how many in here, last question from me, how many of you in here knows how to do CPR? All right, so I can have a heart attack, that's good. Good Sam app, basically, you can register, if you know CPR, register on the app. And if one of us here on the panel have a heart attack, I can press on the app and you get an alert. The 3 nearest people get an alert and you can come on stage and help provide CPR. That's a great app in itself. What we funded it to do was to say, well, hold on. Normally when I see someone have a heart attack, I call the ambulance service. So what now happens is when I call the ambulance service, the 3 people nearest the person who called also get notified. So you get volunteers coming in who might get there 10 seconds, 15 seconds before the ambulance, which can be a matter of life and death or a matter of a life with disability versus a life back at 100% recovery. And it's a good example of trying to say, well, how can we scale and invest in these solutions to really improve public services and how society works? We kind of, following on from our work on Good Sam app, we just launched a fund. I really encourage you to have a look at it, called the Share Lab Fund. We're looking to fund ideas like Good Sam app, where it's people with early stage ideas that want to demonstrate, and my time is up, sorry. All right, that's it for me. But these are my kind of 3 recommendations. If you're a city out there, you're thinking what to do, these are kind of the 3 things I would put on the top of my wish list. And on that note, I hand over to Monique. Very sorry, Monique, I kept you waiting.
Thank you. Okay, my name is Monique Calisti. I'm very happy to be here with all of you. I'm director of Morell Innovate, that is a company based in Switzerland. We're involved in several projects in the domain of smart cities, social innovations, and next generation internet. And today I'm here to present you the CAPS initiative. Does that work? Yes. So first of all, as you have heard already, the CAPS is an initiative that was financed and promoted by the European Commission already 5 years ago, more or less. And why? What are the main objectives of this initiative? First of all, is to create awareness of the role that each of us can play in terms of solving and addressing sustainability problems. Then another key aspect is about providing support to create environmentally aware communities of people that can contribute to address sustainability problems. Then the key idea is also to create and to promote the creation of platforms intended as, in the broad sense perspective. So it's not about just putting together pieces of components of hardware and software. It's about putting together people, policymakers, decision makers to help and address social and sustainability problems. And finally, the idea is to really create better access to knowledge, skills, capacity that can really help changing the way we live and the way we behave within the society. So it's really, the idea, the goal is really to promote and empower, let's say, bottom-up initiatives. So how do we do that? How can you address social challenges and make sure that there is engagement? make sure that there is a critical mass of people taking over. So first of all, it cannot be only an exercise of bringing together apps, network, hardware, and components. It has to bring the human in the loop. We have to have participatory approaches. We have to have user-driven approaches. We have to be able to engage with the existing communities. There are a lot of existing communities that are not aware about the fact that there are funding, there are movements that operate at a more global level. We have to bring them together. Finally, it is important to bring together people with different kind of expertise and background. It goes from psychologists to policymakers, scientists, and you name it. We have to bring them together because from the diversity, we can really appreciate innovation that can help society from different perspectives. Finally, one of the core elements that the CAPS is trying to promote is the adoption, deployment, and promotion of open data, open hardware, open knowledge, and open source resources that can help even when, in fact, there are very limited resources to develop smart cities, to develop smart services for citizens. So the key idea here for today is that a number of the projects of the CAPS have worked and are working in order to empower citizens as a way to build smart cities. Smart cities are not boxes, are not empty boxes that we can simply create by providing apps, by providing gigabit connections and so on and so forth. We must educate the citizens and we must start with grassroots initiatives, because this is where people are. This is where we can find the actors that need to help with addressing social and sustainability problems. So the CAPS that was mentioned also before by Francesca and Fabrizio, it's a program, it's an initiative promoted by the European Commission, and as you can see from this slide, we try to, not in a simple way, but in a pretty colorful way, to show you a number of main areas where we have been involved or where the projects are mainly involved here. So you can see open democracy, open policy making, environmental action, collaborative consumption, and so on and so forth. So these slides will be made available. So I guess you can go through it in more details. But here, my main key message is the following, is that it takes everybody to really change the society. And it takes to tackle different problems from different angles. And this is the richness of CAPS. CAPS has helped putting together more than 2,000 new institutions which have not an ICT profile, which means it is an ICT initiative that opened up for the first time, I think, or one of the first times in the Commission, the door to players that were not given space, that were not given a voice, that were not given funding to actually help developing their innovative ideas. So here we go, and the good news is that there's going to be a couple of calls open in December. So you have to monitor the website of the European Commission, the Horizon 2020 funding webpage. There's going to be in particular two calls that I would like to mention you today. One is the ICT 11, CAPS, so very easy to find. And this is very much plugged and focused on following up on this picture, on this vision that we have. And it's about addressing several aspects about participatory and sustainability challenges that we still need to address and pilot and demonstrate. Then there's going to be another call, which we would like to become a new host for CAPS, for digital social innovation initiatives. And this is called Next Generation Internet. It is going to be, you can find ICT 41. And tomorrow we will have a workshop. I will show a slide more in details. Fabrizio will chair the workshop and more will be said. So the good news is that CAPS goes on and we shall all contribute to grow it. so that the impact will be greater. So what I meant before, I already said, the idea is really to empower citizens, to empower the players, to empower the community from a, let's say, bottom-up perspective. And it's not easy. It's not easy because people have policymakers, innovators, social entrepreneurs. They have different needs, different background, different understanding of the problems. But in order to address this diversity, we need to bring them together. And this is what CAPS is doing. We have projects where you can see an excellent mix of expertise and people, really, in different cities and countries in Europe. So what I mention here is that CAPS is really helping connecting the dots. And we are engaging different stakeholders. We are trying to facilitate sharing experience. Before, Peter mentioned a few events. These events are an opportunity for people to come together, talk to each other, learn from each other. And at the end of the day, what is very important is to create a culture, a new culture in which each and every person involved in social innovation feels that is really directly contributing to address societal challenges. And this is a little bit where we aim to work. So here I will just mention a few projects. So the span of the CAPS projects and of the CAPS initiatives goes from healthcare to open democracy, to water management, environmental aspects, saving food, and you name it. On the CAPSI web pages, you will find a list and a description of all the projects. So I invite you kindly to go there and to basically have your say. Finally, what are the lessons that we learn while the journey goes on? First of all, there is a problem, this financial sustainability. Of course, this is something that I think we all have very clear in mind. It's still an issue. We still need to improve access to information about funding opportunities. That's one of the reasons why we are here. Time is up, but this is really the last few words on this. Sometimes what is needed is not necessarily money, but it's really recognition, spaces, facilities. There's a lot of resources that exist and that can be given to empower citizens. Then we need to sometimes, well, it's clear that we need to adjust procurements, let's say, practices in order to facilitate the task. And at the level of community sustainability, what we need is to involve and work together to bridge the social gap. So now my last slide, where we will meet next. Well, there's two slides, in fact. There's going to be a big event that we organized together also with the Commission, with Peter and other key players. Francesca will be involved, hopefully, in Rome, 1st and 2nd of February. We have a web page dedicated to that. Registration is free, but of course places are limited. So if you're interested, please go and register. Contact us for any more information. And about tomorrow, because we're going to be here, so if you are here, please come and join us. It will be in Hall 2 at 11:45. We will have a session on shaping the next generation Internet Age 2020 research initiative. And Fabrizio will chair it.
Thank you, Monique. So the next speaker is Thomas Diaz. He's an urbanist, but is better known to be one of the founders of the Fab Lab in Barcelona.
Thank you. Thank you, Fabrizio. Hello, everyone. You can put full screen, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to talk about the mass distribution of everything, which is one of the fundamental changes that we're facing with the rise of the digital technologies, and which somehow today we live in a kind of a paradoxical moment in which something as distributed as internet is created so much centralized power at many levels. And one of the things that invites us to reflect is what in the future digital revolutions, especially in the upcoming revolution in fabrication, how we can avoid this high centralization of distributed networks, of distributed technologies in the powers of few, and the consequence and the consequence that it can cause. No? So this comes in the framework of a Fab City, which is a project I'm going to try to unfold as long as I'm talking about what we do. As Fabrizio stated, I'm one of the co-founders of Fab Lab Barcelona, which is the first Fab Lab in the European Union, established around 10 years ago inside the Institute for Advanced Architecture of Catalonia, but that actually now has been supporting the growth of a Fab Lab network during the last 10 years. No? So for you that don't know what Fab Labs are, it's like they look more or less like this. It's like a messy places, like probably half of the size of each room. Some of them that are bigger than this room, but they have digital fabrication technologies that helps people to make almost anything. And they are mainly about democratizing the access to the means of production to anyone. So it means anyone, I mean anyone. You don't need to have a bachelor's degree, you don't need to have a certain age, color, gender, it means everyone. So Fab Labs share a common inventory of technologies which allow the exchange of knowledge across the network. No? If you look at that today, when we started 10 years ago, there were around 10 Fab Labs in the world. And as per today, we have close to 1,000 labs in which you can find this same set of equipment, but also the same ethos, the same philosophy behind the use of that. No? What makes it so fascinating is basically if you think about it at the small scale, you can design something in Cape Town and just send in a matter of seconds to Los Angeles without having to put anything on a shipping container. So I can design something as silly as a cup, and I can send it to your Fab Lab in Los Angeles from Cape Town, and you just 3D print it locally. So imagine which are the implications if we do it in a larger scale. So also that it's not only a manufacturing infrastructure, but actually it's a network of knowledge. It's a network of knowledge in which educational programs like the Fab Academy, which is fundamental for the deployment of new digital social innovation skills, are needed. No? So the Fab Academy is a kind of a distributed university around the Fab Lab. So this is our campus, and this is a classroom in that campus. No? So we're using the world as a university to teach how to make almost anything, to teach how to make the things that make almost anything. If you can make almost anything, then you can make the machines that make almost anything. So it's self-replication of the machines that self-replicate themselves. But also learning how to grow almost anything, which is actually the future of production and how we envision the future of fabrication. It's not just machines with analog materials with digital information, but actually using digital information in order to grow things, to introduce code into materials. And I'm being very serious about this. So we're changing the way we make anything, no? From how we, as it happened with computers and the internet, we change the way we work, the way we fight with the people we love, the way we fall in love, the way we do everything, no? So that's what we're trying to look specifically into our research lab is actually if these things are going to change, how we cannot wait until the future, but actually how we can start to build it tomorrow. No, and we strongly believe that experimentation is a key part of that. Experimentation as an innovation process. It's not just closing yourself in a room and innovate and then go to the reality, but then keep experimenting with the reality in order to innovate. Keep experimenting at different scales, from the people to the neighborhood to the city to the planet. We think that experimentation should have almost like at a different scale, almost simultaneously at the same time. And it sounds abstract, but I will make it sense a little bit about that. So if you imagine which are the implications of digital fabrication, think about a city that now imports most of the products that it consumes, right? So most of the electronics that you're holding here, they're coming, I could bet that 90% of them, they come from Shenzhen in China, and they travel thousands of kilometers in order to be in your pocket for you to work, for you to tweet just right now. So what if we can think about how we can rescale that extreme globalization that we have today, how we can bring production closer to consumption, and how we can use complementary infrastructures that work together as a multi-scalar ecosystem to bring back the capacity of a city to be more resilient through this local production, but basically based on the citizen empowerment of through the access of different tools. So think about that you have your 3D printer in your house or your personal fabricator that you can make things like your, the one leg of your sunglasses or whatever break, you can make it in your house. Then you can go to your neighborhood Fab Lab and basically make stuff in a kind of a community scale. Then you can go to flexible factory at the scale of a district probably, and then you can, the flexible factory could produce 1 week mobile phones, but the next week could produce shoes that Nike has pre-ordered. And then you can go to global supply chains. No? So you have this multi-scalar kind of complementary ecosystem in which you actually are helping to bring back the capacity of cities to respond to what they need in less time, with less kilometers, and with less environmental impact. So I'm going to go faster. When I was talking about experimentation, I'm talking about going and taking the neighborhood scale. This is something that we are starting to roll out together with the City Council of Barcelona. It's the idea of the Makers District, in which we identify the existing communities around the maker movement, but also around productivity in cities, taking the movements around energy, the movements around food, and setting up somehow a space in which these things can be tested and especially learn from it, and put it in practice probably in a larger scale. So we think about experimenting with these kind of tools, with open source tools like Arduino, like RedRap, like Precious Plastic Machines, like Fab Labs, that are bringing a new way for people to relate with technology. It's not just the black box that you're holding in your hand, but it's actually open technologies that you can modify, that you can kind of adapt to whatever you need. And to make projects that they are kind of starting now, like shower loops, like urban farming kits, like solar power generators on a small scale that actually can help you to test off. And that, that the upper right image is actually a synthetic meat, which would be a really interesting thing on how to test this in a kind of a biotech sphere. So those things, they look like how your mobile phones looked 30 years ago. But they're going to change dramatically how you live today, as the cell phone did. So be prepared for that. This is already changing in Barcelona. The public Fab Lab network is actually bringing a new type of infrastructure for people to have access to these tools. It's kind of a library in which information can be turned into things. These are the fabrication atheneums. You can check it. We can, experiment in the neighborhood means that showing how in a small scale we have done, in this case, a complete open source restaurant that you can download from the internet. You can download the menu, you can download the furniture and make it in your Fab Lab, wherever you are in the world. We are thinking about how we can produce food locally using aquaponic systems that reduce by 90% the impact of food and by 50% the use of the soil. Thinking about how citizens can be empowered by the use of new tools in order to capture data about the city and share it in an open source way. By the way, we were awarded with the Smart Citizen Project as the most innovative project 3 years ago in the Smart City Expo, and we are supported by CAPS as well, so it's a perfect stage. So if you think about this is a race of empowered citizens. New tools, open source, available, accessible at different levels, from public sector, from the private sector, and basically in a global scale, which probably it hasn't happened before at this scale. But the thing is that if you think about it, everyone in this room, in few years, you already have the capabilities of broadcasting information, right? So you became publishers, you became editors, you became photographers. But imagine that you can do that when we talk in the physical world. What is you become your own factory? You are now your own kind of publisher, your own agent. But now, what if you can become your own agent? And this can take into other many examples. If you compare it with the race of Bitcoin, you can become your own bank, for instance. So we're talking about the distribution of many levels of our life, not only in a matter of producing information, digital information, but actually producing things. So I think I have to wrap up. I will do this in 30 seconds. So this is real. The Fab City project is happening right now. We launched a challenge 2 years ago for cities of the world to become at least 50% locally productive and globally connected by 2054. Barcelona started, Boston followed, Amsterdam, Paris, with the support of Mayor Anne Hidalgo, which is going to host the Fab City Summit in 2018. With Detroit, Michigan, which is actually the icon of the assembly line of the industrialization, and now is trying to renovate the livelihood of their inhabitants through digital fabrication, with the public commitment of the mayor to support the Fab City and to be part of the Fab City network. Santiago de Chile, Shenzhen, which is the factory of the world where your mobile phones come from. Bhutan, which is the only country that measures the happiness index in the world, but is highly depending on India and China for what it consumes. So we have now 12 cities, 2 regions, 2 countries that are part of this network, and we're moving to a model in which containers don't travel around the world, but only information, and it's starting in Barcelona, and we hope that this could lead to another conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. I think you made a good case for the importance of distributed and decentralized solutions. And I guess we will hear more from Mayo, Fuster, Morell. She has been doing research in several places at the Berkman Center for Internet and Society, the Harvard Universities, and you will tell us more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the organizer to inviting me. So I'm going to be talking from a double hub. On the one hand, as a researcher, I am directing a research group at the Autonomous University of Barcelona, and we have been involved with the CAPS project, with the peer-to-peer value project, and now with the code. But I am going also to provide insights on the base of my role in the Barcelona City Council in the Commission of Social Economy. And I'm going to do two contributions to the current conversation. My first contribution is that digital social innovation is economically relevant, in the sense of we should not only think about digital social innovation connected to social policies or connected to the internet policies for the preservation of the social internet, or even a cultural dimension, but how far digital social innovation has an economical relevance, and how far, and more importantly, how digital social innovation can bring a shift into the economy for the scalability of the social economy. Here in Barcelona, 10% of the economy is based on cooperatives. In Bologna, is 30%. In other places, it's even bigger. I am saying about a part of the economical system that is already happening, and that digital social innovation brings us the opportunity of making it more scalable for a sustainable growth and also for the democratization of economy. This type of dimension of the economical relevance of digital social innovation is happening in the framework of the debates of collaborative economy. So I'm going to inject with this debate and this framework of collaborative economy. My second contribution is going to be about the importance of cities and how cities can do for the promotion of digital social innovation. How cities and how administration generally. We have seen CAPS as an effort of the European Commission in order to support digital social innovation, but actually cities can do a lot, as also Thomas has pointed about how cities are promoting Fab Labs. But I think we need to make the connection and have very present that in order to have economical change, we have to have also political change, in the sense of, for having a truly collaborative economy, we need also collaborative politics. So the bringing of a more collaborative and participative dimensions in the economical system require also a more pro-participative democracy injectment of the administrations. So I'm going to present what, from the case of the Barcelona City Council and the Europe Social Economic Commission, what we are doing actually for the promotion of digital social innovation in order to scale the social economy in the city through the collaborative economy. So this is part of the collaborative economy action plan of the City Council. And the first thing that we did was framing or understanding of what collaborative economy is, and which type of modality of collaborative economy we want to promote. And clearly the Barcelona City Council has pointed about its positioning for common modalities of collaborative economy and support these type of modalities. So in the collaborative economy framework, it's not only about what cities do with disruptive effects of Airbnb and Uber, but also how far cities can promote other modalities modalities that might be more beneficial for the citizens and the economy. And in this regard, when we say that we want to promote commons collaborative economy, we have present the different modalities of collaborative economy. So first, it emerged the open commons model with Wikipedia or Goteo, which is a crowdfunding platform, which is based on non-for-profit foundation, but participative governance. They also support free and open source software technology, and they are based on open data. This is the first model to appear. That is was then followed up by the emergence of the unicorn modality, Airbnb and Uber, that in contraposition with the open commons, they are based on large corporations, centralized governance, closed technology, and closed knowledge. As a more new reaction to this has been the platform cooperatives as building cooperatives connected to the platforms. A very successful case is the case of Fermondo, which is like an Amazon, but being owned by the people who use the platform, or Smart Art, which is a cooperative of freelance providing their services through a platform. So in terms of type of economy are based on cooperatives. They promote also free and open source software projects, and in terms of data depend on the case. There is still a debate on this. In Barcelona, through the peer-to-peer value, we have been mapping the expansion of commons collaborative economy, and we have identified 1,340 initiatives. So Barcelona is truly a very relevant place for this type of economy. A case is the case of WiFiNet, which is a community wireless network that has become the worldwide largest community network. We have other type of cases like the Fab Labs. I want to also to point about LAPA, which is a collaboration between citizens in order to be solidarian with those who are losing their houses for not being able to pay the mortgage, which actually was funded by our city mayor. And has been able to relocate 2014 families and stop evictions. That's collaborative economy, making sure that basic needs are being solved. We also have a growing of platform, what is called platform cooperatives in Barcelona, in the energy sector, in the communication sector, and also in mobility sectors. All of them happen to be named "We Are Something," which point about the importance of the identity of this type of phenomenon to us. We are actually what we share. The second step of the city of the Commons Collaborative economy plan of the City Council has been building a framework for actually a collaborative politics. So we think that collaborative economy necessarily needs a collaborative politics connected. So we have been creating a structure of actors in order to involve the sector in defining the policies and involve the citizens through several ways. Like we created a coordination between different departments in the city affected by or injected with collaborative economy. We created Barcola, which is a group heavily composed by City Council, but highly composed by 20 organizations and cooperatives in the city in order to together develop joint action and advise on the policies of the City Council, and also creating an open forum, call it ProCommons, which is an annual event, a monthly meetup, in order to any citizens to inject. The policies of collaborative economy also was part of the CD in Barcelona. This is a participative democracy website for citizens online support policies. Out of the ProCommons event, which was participated by 400 people in the city, it resulted in a ProCommons declaration with 120 policy recommendations for the City Council. 80 of them has been adopted, and we also sent it to the European Commission and other administrations. There is going to be a new ProCommons event in this spring, so I invite you to inject with it if you are in town. And in terms of type of actions that we have been doing from the plan for promoting commons collaborative economy, we have started a program for training and mentorship of commons collaborative economy in the city, call it La Comunificadora. We have connected the large corporations the last cooperatives in the city, like Abacus, which is a cooperative around books, like buying bookshop network of 30 bookshops that are the main company providing to the universities and the schools, and we are connecting them with Fermondo in order to become a platform modality of providing the service, because they are in crisis for the emergence of Amazon. So the emergence of the digital economy is putting in crisis also the cooperatives. So we are trying to the traditional cooperatives to actually being able to provide digital services. There is also a program for providing match funding, so that the projects get funding, but also through a match funding that they have to go through a crowdfunding, and then the other funding goes from the city council. We also have a reuse program for the reutilization of the technological infrastructure and the use by the city council for collaborative citizens use it. And finally, the city council has a large program for testing the basic income in the city, and also provide local currency. And we are going to be investigating how far basic income and local currency might support the shifting for a commons collaborative economy. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mayo. So now is question time, and we have some help. So do you all know this Ask and Vote app? And are there any questions yet? It's coming. Okay. Otherwise, I think we can still resort to the old way of people standing up and speaking and asking questions, which I won't mind. But there is one. So Julie saying to Thomas, a great idea, how to get people to want to produce, sell, or consume locally in a globalized economy. So how to motivate people to use this?
Well, I think that there is not a single answer to that. It's true that when we talk about bringing back production to the city, it doesn't mean that everyone has to produce everything. We don't mean that everything will be produced in the city, but actually we need to somehow scale down, I would say, the effects of globalization, which are not a secret anymore unless you are a Trump supporter, right? So the thing is that we have a consumer pattern in our heads. That's true. We also have we live in a comfortably numb kind of way of life, which is something that goes, which is part of our culture. No, I think it has been mentioned before. How to change the culture around consumption is something like it's not solved with a moonshot solution. It's not solved with a gadget. It's not solved with a platform that is going to solve everything, right? So I think it needs to articulated efforts from many stakeholders, and even if it sounds cliche, but it doesn't make sense. For instance, we had leave ourselves the hard time of producing something in Barcelona, in Catalonia, or in Spain. We did it with projects that come out of a Fab Lab. It's easier, cheaper, and more reliable to do it in China. And it's the truth. That's the truth. And how to change that? Well, everyone needs to move their assets and look to better policies to support local production and also to support local innovation. It means that giving opportunities to anyone that wants to make anything to have the access to the infrastructure. That's happening in Barcelona. Also to support the reuse of the local industries, that thanks to the the externalization of production, a lot of the industries, they just stopped, they closed. But basically sometimes there is not it's not a match of supply and demand most of the times. So it's more difficult to find information about a factory that is located in Manresa than finding the online information about a supplier in Guangzhou in China, right? So we need to start to connect supply and demand in a more efficient way, in an attractive way for the people that design and produce, and also for the people that provide the service locally. And finally, I would say transparency is fundamental. Transparency in the supply chains, transparency from cities is something that we really push is to have open data about the supply chains of the resources that city consumes. It means we are eating bananas that travel 10,000 kilometers away. You're using iPads that travel 25,000 kilometers with a high level of consequences, environmental consequences in the planet, but also social consequences of people working a lot of, I mean, it's not a myth, it's a lot of people working 16-hour shifts in order to supply the demand of a mass consumption that we're living today. So this will lead, I think, like a more circular approach towards production, especially in cities, and I think that has been highly mentioned. But if we don't feed all these efforts together, then it will be just anecdote and will be just a fun story to tell to our grandkids.
And just can I do 2 short points on that? One is, if you go back 5 years, people said the same thing about 10 years, fair trade, organic food in supermarkets. If I go to a supermarket now, there's almost more organic food than there is old school food. So I think there is also this thing around kind of adoption, and we're kind of at that critical edge where more of this stuff will just happen because it becomes more mainstream. But public policy plays a big role, right? So I think if you and Ellen MacArthur's talk this morning around kind of, there's a lot of stuff we can do around, then when we bring stuff into cities, what we then do with it. And so there's a fantastic policy in Sweden now around saying we're going to pay citizens to fix stuff rather than throw it out. So as a government saying that we actually want to support this exact agenda. And I think that's where public policy can really play a role, and we need more of that to happen as well.
I think what Thomas is bringing about is the importance of another globalization, which is based on sustainable economical model, so not crazy transportation of things, but also connecting putting the citizens' need in the center, but creating a global dimension of open commons. And I think we need to go into this direction, particularly in the context of after Trump winning in the United States, in which there are, for example, Paul Mason that is saying this is the end of the globalization. We are in the moment to have the discussion about which type of globalization do we want. And there are certain elements that are pointed about the need of more sovereignty at the local level, but this doesn't not like more working more at the national level or at your territory does not involve losing the global dimension of solidarity and commons, as Thomas has pointed to.
Thank you. So we have more questions coming in. One is on digital social innovation, whether it's easier in big metropolitan areas rather than in medium or small-sized cities. So this is interesting. I just try to keep it short so that to allow more questions.
Yeah. I actually think that smaller cities can benefit a lot from this kind of processes, because if you think about it, for instance, this is how we're working on this in Barcelona City Hall. It's really when we develop this kind of policies and solutions, really engaging the community, and then we use open source software, open standards, interoperability, and all of that. This is the way where solutions can be shared across cities. So we're doing that with a lot of our policies now. It's really the collaboration between a city like Barcelona, which is bigger, with the little municipalities in Catalonia. So we're really working in cooperation, and you cannot work in cooperation when you have a lot of barriers to entry. So this is, I think, much easier for smaller cities that don't have enough resources, right, to spend upfront and to develop big infrastructure. I mean, when it comes to scale, which I think it's one of the topics that we need to address in this panel, that digital social innovation seems, okay, you show us a lot of small projects, but actually, how does this connect to the scale that cities need to implement these policies to make it for everyone? And I think this is really key, but if you do not work in this collaborative way and you don't integrate this kind of even progressive innovation in the way that, for instance, we do policies, we buy things, we operate on large scale, you will never get this to be really large, to be really the way we do things, right? I mean, I don't perceive digital social innovation as a niche. I perceive it the way we should be doing policies, and we should be doing public policies. We should invest in technology. We should collaborate in that way. We should provide public services, open up public procurement and all of that in order to, I mean, this should be the way we actually normally operate. And I know it's a huge organizational change, but I do think really smaller cities and smaller organizations are the ones that benefit the most from it. And we should aggregate demand in that sense, which we can do much better in this way.
If I may add just a couple of words about this, I think it is a tricky point whether it's easier on a small scale or a larger scale. As Francesca said, it requires, I think, the proper mix of interaction at different levels that entails smaller communities to actually get exposed to bigger communities. It's a sort of an avalanche effect. I mean, in the CAPS projects, we have seen experiences that work at a very small scale in villages, in small towns, but that are being taken over at a bigger scale in several other big cities like Barcelona, like London, and so on and so forth. So it's really a matter of, I think, gathering together all the players and all the people so that the engagement, it's global. So coming back to globalization, this is the level of globalization that we should aim at, making each and everyone aware of the role that they can play. So whether it's, I've heard, if you go to the booths here, there's several booths in which there are some examples from villages here in Spain, cities that have been doing an amazing work. And we have a lot to learn, I think, from this. So I think it's going to come both from the small and from the big players. Otherwise, it won't succeed.
So, thank you. So, we have more questions, but we have no time. So, actually, I would rather like to read out the questions, because I think that often there is more value in the questions than in the answers that we can give at a panel.
That was nice.
So, no reference to the actual speakers, just because we have no time. But it's for respect to the people asking the questions, and because the questions really point out to some open problems, then will take time to be answered. So one is how to achieve the sustainable engagement of communities participating in CAPS. I think this is a very important question on which we all should reflect and which could take more than the whole time of this session to reply to. Another is whether Mayo can elaborate on how to introduce an alternative currency, whether you will follow the transition towns model, which I think is also a question which will take some time to be answered. And then another more interesting is all of you are from the global north. Well, I don't consider myself from the north, but geographically in the world, perhaps yes. So how to create more collaboration with the global south? And I think this is also an open point for discussion. So just to wrap up then this session, thanks a lot to all the speakers and to all the attendees for your participation and for your stamina. We have heard many concepts. We have heard, for instance, about the need for lobbying for digital social innovation. This is something important because you know that governmental initiatives and activities are always influenced and sometimes strongly influenced by lobbies. And lobbies are typically from big industries or big powers who have the knowledge and the money, of course, to fund this kind of lobbies. Whereas for this kind of social innovation activities, it's very difficult to fund people, supporters, money to support them, and also the professionality which is needed to get access to the policymakers, to the decision makers at the right level and at the right moment. So I think it's very important, this point about who is lobbying for DSI, how can this be reinforced? And I don't say that because I want to be lobbied, but because I sense the difference between the different lobbying activities. Another is on the importance of decentralization, coming from the observation of the makers movement, but also in general on the internet, looking at the concentration of power in a few platforms and possible solutions to overcome this. Another interesting point I heard is that DSI and the collaborative commons in general is something that is economically relevant. It's not just something for marginal for society and for economy, but it's something that is growing and probably will become dominant in a few years. And on the importance also of creating a structure of actions using the city as a base for putting together interests and people about this, which could be an answer also to the issue of lobbying for DSI. So finally, I just want to remind you about this DSI event in Rome at the beginning of February, which will be a good occasion to show up, to showcase the results of these 36 CAPS projects that we have running, because now the challenge is to demonstrate that there has been added value in launching this initiative, also in order to justify possible follow-ups. So thanks a lot to all of you for your participation, and have a nice continuation.